All right, welcome to the final community forum on the reopening of schools this week before the deadline to submit your parent choice form that is due at 5 p.m. today. We'll talk a little bit more about any questions that you have. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that and you can ask your questions into there, and we will get to as many of those as we can. We'll dive into our questions. One that we've been getting a lot of lately is, has any specific guidance from the Department of Health been released on what happens when someone tests positive for COVID-19 in the school district, whether it's a teacher or a student?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate everyone tuning in, and we hope the information that we've been able to provide so far has been helpful. We had the session on Monday and then the 3 principal videos. If you weren't able to catch those live, they are all posted and available. So again, we thank everyone for taking the time to log in and listen to the forum, and hopefully we're giving you the information you need to be able to make a decision. In terms of guidance from the state, we are on a weekly call with the Department of Health and the County Executive's Office. I just got off that call a little while ago today. And for those who were on the call last time, they heard me say they've been amazingly supportive and helpful and have really been a partner in this. We've had a great relationship with our Department of Health prior to this pandemic, and that's only gotten stronger. So we're very fortunate, and we thank them for their work. There has been recent guidance that was sent, and it's in our plan now. Essentially, it says schools must establish policies in consultation with the local health department about the requirements for determining when individuals, particularly students who screen positive for COVID-19 symptoms, can return to in-person learning environment. This returning to learning protocol must include at a minimum documentation of evaluation by a healthcare provider, negative COVID-19 testing and symptom resolution, or if COVID-19 positive, release from isolation as required by the Department of Health. So that is in our plan now. You'll see it in there. I believe it's actually in our FAQ as well. So for those who want to see it in writing or be able to refer to exactly. But in short, we will need documentation of evaluation by a healthcare provider and a negative test in order for a student to return to us. And that's new, and that's for students and staff who had symptoms of COVID-19. So that's if you're deemed to have those symptoms, whether you have them or not in the end, you need to be tested. So.
We talked a bit last time about a new guidance that was you received the other night from your nurses about students who have an illness that's not COVID. Do you have any information about what will be, how those students will be handled returning to school?
Yeah, so the guidance that we have right now that I just read is for COVID-19 symptoms. In terms of that guidance, nothing has changed since Monday night when we did that call. So nothing has changed in terms of those students. Again, we're updating our plan regularly. What we started doing with the plan is when we do a revision, we're color coding it, trying to not necessarily do it all the time, but to kind of go in chunks to do the revisions if possible, and color coding them so it's easier to find things that are new in the plan. And our FAQ is being updated in the same manner. So we have that document out. Brian, who's moderating today, is actually the one who's updating that, and we're trying to color code that as well, just to make it easier for people to find new information. I know there's a lot coming at people, and we're trying to minimize the amount of people have to read and reread looking for something new. So we'll color code where we can to try and assist people with that.
I think there's also been a bit of confusion with what the governor said recently and about who will be doing the testing. Some people are asking whether your own doctors will have to do it, whether the county does it, or whether the school will be doing it.
Yeah, so there was some confusion. It was, I guess, 2 Mondays ago now when the governor's remarks came out that we are going to have to do our own testing. That's since been kind of clarified, and Averill Park, as well as the other districts in our county, in our BOCES really, and for that matter, all the ones that I know of in the capital region in the state, we are not doing our own testing. We're not equipped to do that, and that was never the intent. We have a very good relationship, as I mentioned, with the Department of Health. So when we have a suspected case or a confirmed case, the first person that we're going to call, or first group we're going to call, is the Department of Health. We have 24/7 access to them. And again, we were just on that call today. We've exchanged cell phone numbers. We have a direct contact between the Commissioner of Department of Health and each of the superintendents so that we can communicate effectively. Our nurses, and for us, it's our directors of nursing. We have two, or co-directors, have almost daily contact, if not daily contact, with the Department of Health officials that they work with. And that line of communication has been and will continue to be what we'll utilize to refer students, to get information on students, and the Department of Health will handle the testing in terms of guidance, the contact tracing, all that stuff will come from them. They are working now through our BOCES, which is Quest R3, to provide wording so that we all have the same information in our plans. And once we have that information from BOCES and from the County Department of Health, we'll update our plan accordingly. We know that that was a directive of the governor. Among the three things that we had to update was the contact tracing, the testing, and the remote learning. We'll have all those up on the website by Friday. What we're looking to do actually to make it easier for people is to link those so that the link on the website to say, for example, contact tracing, when you click on it, will just take you to the contact tracing portion of our plan. We want to do that to minimize the number of places we have to update information so to be more efficient, so we don't have outdated information on one spot versus another. So we will have that information up once we get it. And again, I guess to answer the question, we will be using the Department of Health to do our testing.
In our last session, we had a question about athletics and if students who choose the virtual learning only plan can participate in interscholastic sports. And this was clarified by the NYSPHSAA earlier this week.
Yes, so that guidance came out, and I know from looking at our reopen at APCSD email inbox, that question came up multiple times in there. We've tried to communicate that out. Excuse me, yesterday I know our athletic director, Mark Bubniak, was able to join the middle school and high school sessions, and we do now have confirmation in writing, and I believe, again, that memo is up on our website. But if you are a virtual learner, and going back to our last session where Matt clarified the semantics of how we're using those words. So virtual for us means the people who are choosing the remote option right now, right? So we are right now planning on being in person K-5 and hybrid 6-12. If you're choosing not to attend either hybrid or in person, we're considering you to be virtual, and distinguishing that from remote learning, which would be our third portion of the plan that we had to submit. And the remote is really when we are shut down as a district and everyone is home. So long-winded answer to your question, but if you are virtual, then you are allowed to participate in athletics as well as extracurricular clubs. That guidance has come down, and we now have that.
Will there be any synchronous learning in 100% virtual learning option?
All right, I'm going to turn that one over to Matt.
I knew that was coming my way, Dr. Franchini. So we are still working on the models for virtual learning. We know that the results of the survey are going to really be important for us in determining how many kids and how we're going to be able to address them, and what kind of course offerings we'll be able to provide depending on the level. So we don't know exactly what the model will look like for every student in virtual learning. That being said, we're hoping to provide opportunities, it may not be full day, it may just be for one course, where there would be some synchronous activities with the teacher here at school. Obviously, it comes down to our capacity to staff. We know we are going to be, particularly at the 6-12 level, we will be staffing teachers in both in-person and kids at home as part of our hybrid model. And then we have the virtual track on top of that. So There might be some limitation of resources there, but if the opportunity presents itself and we can align a teacher here with the students in the virtual track for at least one or maybe two courses, then obviously we would look to have synchronous opportunities for them. I guess I'll just continue that by saying at the virtual for K-5 elementary, we do have a higher expectation for synchronous learning, as we are, again, depending on numbers, looking to align a specific teacher with a grade level. So there would be a teacher assigned to all of our virtual learners in third grade. And in those situations, we would be looking at synchronous learning. Again, not all the time. We're trying to obviously limit screen time as well, but we would look for opportunities to have some synchronous learning and asynchronous learning for our K-5 virtual learners.
Now, if a child needs to be quarantined, whether it's possible exposure, travel to an area in question, will it be easy for that person to then switch to the virtual learning and then back to the in-person learning once they come back?
A great question, and I'll let Matt kind of talk through some of the details of that switch. It's very much, I think, undecided and difficult, but Matt can kind of talk through some of the challenges there. Before I turn over to Matt, I'm just looking at my notes from today's call, and I wanted to make sure I brought up a couple of things. Our call with the Department of Health, they are going to be providing us with a list of testing sites weekly, and they said that because the testing sites change that often. So they will be providing the district a list. We will pass that on. We talked about maybe just having a link that they give us that links directly to their site. They're also going to make sure the list of states that are on the list of states that you can visit and come back will be updated regularly. So we'll have that through the county and really from the state. And the Department of Health will give letters to people releasing them from quarantine. It's something they have been doing, and that's used for employers, mostly in this case because schools have been shut down. But that's another piece of this puzzle. That students will have to have that letter from the Department of Health releasing them from their quarantine. So all, again, steps that are being put in place through the county health. We'll get this in writing from the county and pass that along through our plan, but I wanted to make sure I brought that up while it was in my mind. And now back to Matt for the actual question that was asked.
Well, Brian, can you repeat the question again?
Right, so the question was, if a student tests positive and has to be quarantined, or if they go out of state and have to be quarantined, how easy will it be for them to go from an in-person to virtual, and then virtual when they are allowed to come back to the in-person?
I think we would view those situations similar to what we've always done in the past in terms of having a long-term absence or illness. So I don't know that we would switch a student from in-person or hybrid to our virtual model, but rather we would support them within our in-person hybrid model. So if it's an elementary student, just like we've done in the past where students had a long-term illness, the teacher would provide work for that student. There'd be opportunities for them to check in, make sure everything is they're progressing, keeping up with the work. And same thing at the high school, middle school. We deal with long-term absences on an annual basis and work with the student and the family to make sure that they're keeping up with the work. So I would anticipate we'd be doing a lot of the same activities for a student that would be forced to be home because of a quarantine issue.
Will the district, does the district anticipate having to hire more teachers or subs to fill the needs of, say, teachers who might test positive and are out for a long period of time, and then also having the different teachers for remote, virtual?
So we are anxiously awaiting the results of the survey. We've been checking in probably far too regularly on the results. So we have a good idea of where we're at. We've got about 2,000 respondents, I believe, last time we checked, give or take. So we are keeping an eye on that and kind of hoping to have this final push today. And really that information is so crucial to us for our planning purposes, which plays into that question right there and how I would answer it. A lot of this will depend on our numbers. We are trying to do the best we can in terms of all the spots. And that means teachers that are in person, or teachers that are teaching our in-person students, teachers that will need for the virtual learning, aides and those type of positions that will need to do our procedures that we're putting in place correctly and properly. For example, we've ordered now temperature scanners. We're going to have those multiple ones in each building, transportation, district office. So obviously easier in transportation or in the district office as opposed to the school, where we'll need people kind of dedicated to checking students as they come in to make sure their temperatures are in line with the guidance, and then if not, escorting them to the proper place. So yes, the short answer to that question is we are anticipating having to do extra hiring in order to make the system work properly. We talk all the time in our district about being good stewards of our financial resources. And we have talked, at least I know since I've been back the last 3+ years, about our decreasing enrollment and as a result of that trying to shrink our footprint. However, we are not willing to sacrifice student or staff safety in the name of not having enough people to do this properly. So we will hire as much as we need to hire. We don't anticipate a lot, to be honest. It's not like we're talking about large numbers, but where we need to add an aide or a teacher or whatever the services that are needed, we will, and we'll figure that out and adjust accordingly. So our student and our staff safety is of the utmost importance. Getting our students back, getting them back into this environment, we feel very strong that it needs to be done, and we want to bring kids back, and we want to bring them back safely. So we will hire where necessary and will not let cost be a driving factor in preventing the opening. It require some creative use of funds maybe, and using some reserves and using monies that were not spent in the past because of the shutdown. So we feel like we're in solid shape and we can do it and we will do it.
Just to remind everybody, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, just fill it in there and we'll try to get to it. The next question is, we have plans for all 3 modes of learning. If at some point the district has to close down and go fully remote, or if districts around the state are allowed to open and safely 100% across the board, are plans in place for any of those models?
So per the governor's and state education department's guidance document, we had to come up with 3 different plans. The remote plan is for 100% at home shutdown where our schools are not open, similar to March through June. The hybrid model, which is what we're looking at for 6-12, is where our students are here on some kind of alternating basis. And then the 100% in-person model. So yes, we do have plans, and you can see those in our reopening plan, that enable us to do these 3 things. We think we can do all 3 well. I think we're most concerned regarding the ones that we've picked and fine-tuning the details of those. Obviously, they're the higher priority right now and the most time sensitive. So we want to make sure we have the K-5 in-person and the 6-12 hybrid as good as it can be. But we have not done that at the cost or the sacrifice of the other plans. And I'll let Matt talk about really what we've done to adjust our remote learning plan, because I think that's important for people to hear. We did the best we could, and I think most districts will tell you the same answer. Given the notice that we had and where we were, we all just did the best we could, and it was fine, and it worked, and it was okay. But we realized that there's a lot of changes we could make with some time and some planning and some professional development and some investment in resources. So we have done that work really since the end of this past school year, really around June 1st or so, when we really started looking at what would September look like, or sometime in the 2020-2021 school year if we were to be fully remote. So there has been a lot of work done to get us into a better spot if we are to go fully remote. It's probably the area that we've talked about the least, just because the questions have been about in-person at K-5 and hybrid at 6-12. So that's my very long-winded setup for Matt to answer that question.
It took all the answers. No, I think the one thing I would add in the plan, you can find links to the schedules that we would be implementing in a remote learning schedule. And I think what I want to draw attention to is the fact that there are very defined schedules, something that we didn't have in the spring because, as Jim said, we were very much responding to an emergency and trying to make it through, as we're pretty much all schools. And so with the luxury of a little more time, I feel very good about our remote learning plan. Obviously hoping to never have to use it. We're kind of viewing that as, the worst case scenario where we would not be able to bring kids in every day. But I feel much more confident about it than I did back in the spring, because we have schedules, we have time for asynchronous and synchronous learning. We have embedded time for connections with teachers beyond instruction. So that social emotional piece that we know is going to be so important, particularly if we do shut down again. So we've really set a schedule. We've set expectation. We raised the bar. We expect rigor. We expect accountability. There would be daily attendance. All the things that we have grown accustomed to in the traditional school that we really had to leave behind when we were merely in survival mode for 3.5 months. So I think, again, I would encourage you to go look at the plan that we have online, and in that section you'll find specific information about remote learning, including the schedule, and I think you'll see what we've done to address that going forward.
Will there be an opportunity for a socially distanced meet and greet? So for virtual students, they can be introduced to their teachers?
That is something we have not thought of. It's an interesting idea, a virtual meet and greet for the students who are staying at home. I think that's something we could add to our list. We've gotten some good suggestions from the community, things that we had not thought of. I think that would be one of them, right, Matt? We have not, to my knowledge, that's not come up through any of the subcommittees or task force or admin meetings or board meetings or
just I guess more informally in discussions with the principals. There definitely have been some consideration to more orientation type work for the kids that would be coming in on a hybrid or an in-person model. But for the group that's exclusively virtual, I think once we know who those kids are, who the teacher will be that will be working with her, whether it be at the K-5 or 6-12, it could be teachers. I think we can certainly look at ways to make sure that they build that community. We know we are working with every teacher between now and the opening of school on building relationships with kids if they are not there in person. And that's a big part of our social emotional learning work that we're doing. And we know we need to address that as much as we need to address the academic needs. So part of that is, if the kids weren't in front of you, how would you build that community relationship that we're so accustomed to in a classroom? So I think that plays really well into the work that we would want our virtual learning teachers to do with the students that are going to be home every day.
Will there be a plan for screening for students who may have traveled out of state on a weekend or gone on vacation, or family members who might show symptoms?
So our health screening tool that's going to go out will have those questions in it. We kind of modeled ours after NARIC, which is our Northeast Regional Center for Data on the school side. So our questions will go with what they've used. We've also are using the same questions or close to it that our BOCES is using, that Questar is using. So the questions kind of cover that in our health screening. For staff, that screening is required per the guidance daily, and we plan to do that certainly. And for our students, the guidance has it down as periodic. We're talking through what that means exactly now. It's not a daily requirement. We are doing a daily temperature check at each entry point for staff and for students. So we know we're going to be doing temperature checks on site as students and adults enter the building, and every staff member will have to fill out the screening tool daily, and students will have to do it periodically. What that means exactly, we have not decided. We could do it more than, we could do it daily. That's certainly periodic, or we may do it weekly. But we have looked into that. We're actually in conversation with other districts to see what they're doing and trying to get ideas and seeing not only how to do it, but how to manage it, because it's a process that needs to be done and done well in order to be effective. We don't want to tell people that we're doing it daily and not manage it properly. So we're trying to make sure that we have a system in place that is efficient and effective and is honest and transparent, and that we're not just wasting people's time, but that we're actually, if we're going to do it, we're following through and capturing it and doing it in a meaningful way to keep people safe.
There are a number of things that happen throughout the school year that are typically held in person, parent-teacher conferences or school pictures. As a district, thought about how to make those possible, especially for the students who might be fully virtual?
We've had discussions about those things. I don't think we've had any decisions on those things. It's going to look different. We know that. It's going to look different if you're a virtual student. It's going to look different hybrid. It's going to look different in every facet. Even our clubs and activities for our students who are going to be in person. We are at this point really going to hold our clubs and activities virtually because we're not having late buses. We need to dedicate our drivers to the routes and make sure buses are cleaned afterwards. And we're not looking to add that. We also have adjusted staffing. So our custodians, for example, move more of those into earlier shifts so that they're available during the day for cleaning. So we're trying to balance what is our core mission and what is our main priority. And for us, and I think you've heard that through some of the principal forums, our main mission is a sound and basic and core educational program. That has to be paramount for us. It just has to be. So while we are certainly sensitive to the many traditions that are out there in terms of group assemblies, whether it's the pep rally or, there's a million of them. We want to be sensitive to those things. We want to try to make them work. We're going to have to make them look different to the best that we can. But we, right now, especially at this point, is the calendar turns from July to August and pretty soon to September. We want to make sure that our core academic program is what we're focused on. And that's what our time and our energy and our resources are focused on. Those conversations are absolutely happening, and they're happening in the background. And we've had many discussions about them, but I think you'll get more details on those as we get through the opening up of school, which is a pretty significant task in and of itself.
Can you talk a bit about food service and what that might look like this year and what type of precautions are being implemented?
Our assistant superintendent for business, Michael, we met, and Colleen Wise, our food service director, have had a million conversations about this as we look to build, again, a program that's safe. A lot of that conversation has been taking place somewhat separately because we also are trying to work on the numbers and the scheduling portion. With the survey due today, and again, I kind of keep going back to that because it is important for us, for people to get that survey done. That is going to drive a lot of the next steps. In terms of food service, yeah, we are going to do it as safely as possible. In the elementary world, that means students will be eating in the classroom as opposed to the cafeteria, largely because cafeterias will be used for classroom space. So we have a lot of questions regarding how will the food be delivered, how will it be picked up, how will you do the ordering. All those type of questions are being worked on in the background. Certainly at 612, same type of issues, bringing students down, getting their lunches. They're going to be eating in larger group spaces, so that'll look different than the K-5 world, but it will still be different than what they're used to. And I think you heard through the conversations up until now, how we manage the movement of people through the building is going to change. And that plays into certainly lunch, how we dismiss kids, how we move kids through the hallways, how we utilize bathrooms, how we utilize the cafeteria is going to look different, and safety will be the top priority. It might mean extending lunch periods. So what the times that we usually serve lunch are going to have to be expanded on both ends, perhaps, because it's just going to require more time to do things. It might, going back to that earlier question, might involve the hiring of more staff. We may need to add aides to help in the delivery or the supervision of lunch. So those things are being worked on and being talked about. I just hesitate to give anything really firm or detailed. One, because I don't want to give misinformation and then have to walk it back later on and someone say, oh, they said on August 12th they were doing this, because we don't have a lot of those answers yet. And secondly, because they're in so many ways building specific and level specific based on the current structure of our buildings. They all look different and function different. Whether it's Miller Hill with Sand Lake with multiple levels, or we're just different. So a lot of those are building level discussions and details. We're meeting again on Monday, and we have time actually set aside specifically just for food service and time set aside just for transportation to kind of kick that to the next level as we prepare for the opening.
Can you talk a bit about how you see Questar fitting into high school schedules?
Certainly, we consider Quest our partner. They're a great BOCES and a great resource for us. There's a lot of talk at the BOCES level about doing some form of, I'll call it distance learning or online learning. Those conversations are certainly preliminary at this point. Our belief is that we can and we will use Averill Park faculty where we can and we will. That's what we prefer. Not as a slight to Questar, it's just we know our faculty and our faculty knows our students, and we believe strongly in our educational program and our resources and the quality of our teachers. And I think there's a strong belief to use our district resources appropriately, and that means developing faculty and programs in-house as much as we can. And then we utilize Questar for those things that we can't provide. And we send kids out for CTE in Tech Valley High School and all sorts of great options that, new visions that Questar provides. So we'll continue to use Questar for those purposes, but in a virtual model or a hybrid model or a remote model, our preference certainly is to use our staff, our faculty, because we do believe that they are experts and they know our kids and they know our population and they know our curriculum, and that will of course be our first preference in all these issues.
Will AIS services be available to students who may be struggling?
I can take this one because I know it's heading my way. So yes, AIS is I guess I'll explain it this way. AIS it follows an RTI model, which is broken into 3 tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. At the very least, we know our tier 1 is going to have to address all of our learners. Tier 1 is core instruction. So when you think about RTI for ELA, all of our students are getting tier 1 RTI just through the nature of having core instruction in their classroom. And we would continue that and probably likely beef that up if we aren't able to deliver as many students at tier 2 and tier 3, which are our more struggling learners. We know in the models we're looking at, depending again, as Dr. Franchini said, depends on the number of students, we may have to utilize some of our AIS teachers to be virtual learning teachers or to fill grade levels. So in that scenario, we may not have as many AIS service providers. So we would have to be more diligent about who's getting tier 1 versus tier 2 and tier 3. But we have recognized and taken great pride in the improvements that our AIS program has made over the past few years to really start to address our struggling learners. So we don't want to sacrifice that and want to make every attempt we can to keep providing that same level of service with the understanding that we may not be able to service as many, but we still want to be able to service our most struggling learners in both the areas of ELA and math.
Has a district considered staggered times for dismissal or the first few weeks, especially while the school goes through the temperature checks, whether it's dismissal or entering into the school building?
Considered it, yes. We have certainly considered all sorts of things in terms of arrival and dismissal. We've decided at this time to continue with the schedule as planned. What we've done at each level is the principals have kind of built some time into that schedule so that the core instructional program is not being impacted by arrival, which we know is going to take longer. And in some cases, especially at the elementary, dismissal, which we know is going to take longer. So we're trying not to impact that core instruction piece, but we haven't altered our start times. We have a unique challenge here that most districts do not, in that we have 100 square miles to cover. So when you talk about bus runs and transportation, it's a little bit harder for us. And I've been on calls with colleagues in the Suburban Council and colleagues in our BOCES, and some of the things that you hear that are out there are all really, really, really good ideas, but they're much easier to do in a district that is much smaller. So when you're trying to cover 100 square miles, it's more challenging to do those type of things. And in the end, we thought it was best to kind of keep our start and end times locked in, adjust our schedule accordingly during the day, and do the best we can. We, for example, we've tried to make some changes around that. Our temperature scanners, we've purchased more than we originally thought. because we wanted to increase the number of entry points so that we had less kids coming into those points and they're able to then socially distance better and it'll take less time to get them in. So we've tried to do some other things to mitigate wholesale changes like arrival or dismissal, which will be challenging enough, especially in this climate. Making it work is always challenging in terms of keeping bus runs on time, especially in September. We always have kinks to work out because you can run them and schedule them as best you can, but until you actually do them with kids, and it's going to change, and that's on a good year. So it's certainly going to change even more this year, and we thought it was just better to just do it, start right away with it, and make adjustments as we go through the process.
Will extracurricular activities still take place throughout all levels of the district?
At this time, we are anticipating extracurriculars to continue, but they'll be virtual. And again, we're doing that more from an equity point of view. Without late buses, we know certain kids are not going to be able to stay because they can't get a ride home. And if kids are in the AAB hybrid model, then they're not going to be here certain days. So that impacts our ability to do that equally. And then we also know students who are choosing the virtual option would be left out if we were meeting in person. So what we're working on with our club advisors is to do the clubs as best we can from a virtual point of view and make them work the best we can. Again, knowing things are different, but trying to be fair and equitable and take all of our students into account.
Do we have any idea when schedules will be sent out to students?
No, we do not. I don't know. Again, the data and the survey, we have a plan in place for the survey to be done by today. We know that there will be people who, for various reasons, do not submit. So we have a plan to make direct contact with people to the best of our ability on Thursday and Friday who have not submitted so that we can start to get that information in. And we're hoping that by Friday at the latest, we are really solid and that we're a really good idea that our survey results are able to be broken down by level, by building, and by grade. So we can, at that point, really dive into these numbers and see what it looks like in terms of class sizes and spaces and really dig into the details of that, because that'll be a significant project in and of itself for transportation to get the routes to go correctly, given the hybrid schedule and the limitations that we're trying to work through at the elementary level with busing, as well as physical class size limitations in buildings. So it'll be a heavy lift, and that's why we want to get this data back so we can get those class lists out sooner than later. But I'm sure they will be later than you're used to.
Talk a bit about the certain classes that might be outside and how they'll be able to social distance and be safe, specifically for physical education, recess, or educational opportunities that might be outdoors.
I would love to have Matt talk about that one. I'll turn that one over to him.
Sure. So, and actually, I will somewhat defer to, I know I sat in on both Mr. Messier and Mr. Keelis's presentation last night, and they talked a bit about outdoor spaces, probably far more eloquently than I will. They are planning on using outdoor spaces for gym as we always have, no different there. They are hoping to use outdoor spaces for eating. And there'll be a limited amount of instructional space. I don't think it's something that we're looking to do too much of. We believe the environments that we've set up inside are equally as safe. And so therefore, there isn't a huge need other than a teacher's decision to bring their class outside if they want to. So they are aware of that. They're going to have a schedule for teachers to sign out so they know where kids are at all times. To ensure that they're as safe as they would be if they were in a PE class outside as well. So being outside instruction is nothing new for us. We've dealt with the security issues of that all along. It's just a matter of we may have more of that going on, and so we'll make sure we do our part to know where they are. But again, I don't see a lot of that happening on the instructional side beyond what we normally would do.
Seeing that lockers and cubbies are not going to be used this year, do students have adequate space for lunchboxes, backpacks, coats, boots, anything that they might have to bring with them on a daily basis?
Yeah, that answer, I think, varies certainly by level. And I know that our principals have been working through those challenges. Middle school and high school will be using their backpacks. Elementaries, when we did the walkthrough, they talked a lot about that kind of personal space. I think Laura referred to it yesterday as an island, and developing, a plan for them so they have their own space to be able to put things. We're going to limit the use of lockers. We're going to limit the use of cubbies, but we can still use them. And I think as time goes on, we may change how we utilize them, but there is the opportunity to use some of those things and use some of those spaces and to give kids space in their area that we think will be appropriate. It'll be perhaps more challenging than in the past. Obviously, students, especially at the middle school, are used to their lockers. Our high schoolers really don't use lockers all that often, even before this. So I think the challenge is less significant as you go up and the demands change, certainly. So our building level principals are working through those. And I think in the end, the kids will have the space they need to function properly, for sure.
Have you received any guidance about Regents exams and how they'll affect high school graduation requirements or the state assessments?
Right now, the plan from New York State is that it's business as usual for this coming school year. They have said nothing about not having Regents exams or not having our 3-8 assessments. Our first, I guess it's two different parts, because one is controlled by New York State, the other is controlled by the federal government. So the Regents exams are controlled by New York State. Our first set of Regents would be in January. So we'll have some indication where they're going with Regents, probably sometime in the fall, in advance of those first set of Regents. The 3-8 assessment's a little different. That's not a decision New York can make. They would have to apply for a federal waiver, which is what they did this past year. There's been some talk that they may seek that again, but nothing that I've seen that is decided one way or another. So right now, the indication is that we're preparing as we always would for both Regents and the 3-8.
And as a lot of this information hasn't been finalized yet, will there be another Zoom call or meeting down the line before school starts to get some of the final details?
Yeah, I think we've tried to put a high value on communicating and providing information as we have it and being transparent. So I would anticipate more of these type of sessions for people. My assumption as we get closer is that it'll be more building specific questions that we get, and it'll probably be more in the hands of the principals through their communications, whether it's a Zoom or a Meet or a video, or they all kind of do it a little bit differently. But if the need arises to have another Q&A type session, we certainly would do it. Or if there's a way to virtually bring people together that would be effective and useful, we would certainly do it. So I think we'll kind of take it as it comes, but certainly open to whatever communication that would be helpful. We'll certainly keep the reopen inbox or email box open. So we have that as an option. We'll use the website, social media to communicate information and try to communicate as best we can. Absolutely.
On that, I think we are going to wrap up this call for today. We have had 4 presentations over the last 3 days, 5 counting this one. They'll all be on the website for you to view. The principal ones are on the website. The first superintendent conference is on the website, and the board meeting from the other night is also on the website. And the link to the parent choice form was emailed to all parents. And if you need that before the 5 o'clock deadline today, you just reach out to the district to get that link resent to you. Is there anything else that Mr. Layden or Superintendent Franchini would like to say before we get off?
No, just thank you again to everyone for participating. We appreciate the support and the patience and the respectfulness and that has come in through the questions at all the levels and in our main inbox. And hopefully we're providing information you need. We know there's a lot that is coming at you, and we know there's a lot that you probably wish you had. So I understand both. We're trying to just be as transparent, provide information as fast as we can, as quick as we can, as clear as we can. It does change very frequently. So we'll continue to do that to the best of our abilities. We thank everyone for their participation. Again, we're asking people to get those surveys back to us just to help us in our planning and preparation so that we can move that ball forward. We have a lot of work to do, and school opens up pretty quickly. So the more information we have, the better we'll be able to plan and make those decisions that are correct and ensure safety, class sizes, bus routes, all those things that are so important to people, and we agree completely. So the more time we have to do that, the better we'll all be. So thank you again, and we appreciate all the questions.